I'd like to call the meeting to order for Monday, January 9th, 2023, regular council afternoon meeting. This meeting is being recorded live and is streaming on the District of Summerland YouTube channel. All representations to council, written or verbal, will form part of the public record and be available to the public for viewing electronically or as a written record. Corporate officer, any late items? No late items. So get approval of the agenda, please. Councillor Patton, Councillor Traynor, all in favor? That carries. And so item 4, we're introducing our consent agenda. This is our first consent agenda. So here, any councillor has the opportunity to remove any item from the consent agenda if they so wish. This is the time to do it. You won't be able to do it later on in the agenda, so you'd have to do it right now. So for example, if anybody wants to talk about potential SOLGA resolutions, you'd have to withdraw that piece of correspondence to talk about it later. Anybody like to take anything from the consent agenda? No, so then I'd ask for approval of the consent agenda. Councillor Patton, Councillor Peak, all in favor, and that carries. And we're on to delegations, is that correct? Yes, straight to delegations now. And so I'll call up Greg and Petra from the Museum Society. And Cal, perfect.
Yeah. Okay. We're here today to, first of all, thank you for the original $15,000 we received last year for employing our consultant. And this is by way of a report back on the progress we've made over the year. And we feel very, very good that we've made good progress and quite, with Cal's help, of really understand what the needs are at the museum. We'd like to acknowledge that the Summerland Museum and Archive Society respectfully acknowledges that we are situated on the unceded and ancestral territory of the Silks people. As the beginning. The first slide, and we'll move this right along. We always like to start with a mandate when we make any presentation, because this is the most important thing to our board, and I think the most important thing that relates to our role in Summerland is to preserve and promote Summerland's history. That's why we're here, and to look after these archives on behalf of the District of Summerland. And make it a place that people can enjoy and relate to as part of their town's history. Petra?
Yeah, so with our facilities, there are 3 key services that we provide to the community of Summerland. So those are collections, display, and public outreach. So our collections, we collect, catalog, store, preserve, and display artifacts and archival documents pertaining to our local history. We also do research for the public, for commercial, and for our own exhibitions, and sharing with the public as well. The other part is display. We have our permanent exhibits, also 2 to 3 temporary exhibits per year, and the Giant's Head Model Railway. And then public outreach. So there are many different events and activities listed there that happen annually. So since the museum building was built, it was constructed in 1983, opened to the public in 1984. That's pretty much 40 years ago. And we've grown a lot. The community of Summerland has grown a lot, and the museum has grown as well. So the population of Summerland has nearly doubled in that time. And likewise, our collections have grown alongside the town. So you can see there, when the building was built, we had roughly 4,784 items, but now we have accessioned 25,185. As the town has grown, we've also adjusted our services. So we're now open regular hours all year round, and we've also increased our staffing. So, sorry, I really need some water. We now have 2 full-time equivalents in our staff. Oh, you guys have tons of water, that's great. Gosh, thank you so much. Oh, wow, it's like Disneyland here. So with that growth comes with some constraints. So In terms of our collections, like I pointed out, they have grown by over 400%. So we have run out of space for our collections in terms of storage, also for incoming artifacts. We have no space for working on exhibits, and our staff workspace overlaps with all of our artifact storage space as well.
This is an example. We'll go back the slide. Back one. Petra's office is right in the very center of that slide.
You got to talk into the microphone.
Oh, sorry. Her office is right in the center of that slide with all of the artifacts around her. This is what we're trying to improve.
And then, of course, public outreach. This is a photo of a lecture happening in our Tate Room. So the Tate Room is also our temporary exhibit gallery. So as you can see, it is jam-packed full of people. So it limits the amount of people that can attend our events. But then likewise, it also limits the kind of exhibits that we can show in that room. And then in terms of display, permanent exhibits take up 50% of the floor area, whereas it should only be a maximum of 40%. And it's really limiting the amount of items that we can show. Summerland has a very rich history, and it's a lot more than just fruit. So we would love to have the opportunity to explore more compelling social issues in our displays. Did you want to talk about this one, Greg?
Sure, I'll take this one now. The design rationale was developed through research by our board, Petra, and Cal as well, our architects, and very much informed by the museum industry standards, of which there are, CCI is the main source. All our collections need to have a secure climate control space for their preservation. At the moment, we have 3 storage facilities for our collection. The RCMP basement, the museum, and a container up in the workshard. Container in the workshard is one that we really want to empty. So the notion is that we will create a space within the museum that is climate controlled, sealed, fireproof for moving more of our collections in there. We need a covered loading dock because to have traveling exhibits, which we would like to bring in and to share with other museums in the valley, you need controlled environment to move exhibits. We can't take them out in the rain, so we'd like to get that covered. We need to separate all the work areas so that there's room for preparation, there's room for the office work, administrative work to happen, and more areas for our volunteers. We have up to 60 volunteers right now in the museum, and we need space for them to actually work. And having a public-facing addition will improve the visibility to the public. Our addition will be glazing will face the roundabout, which will be a good advertising for us. And making it more accessible, getting rid of the small corridors, creating media stations, doing a number of things that will allow the museum to be much more accessible for the public and for our staff. Now, I'd like to invite Cal up now to give you an idea of the state of the design. These are some initial sketches, plus there are slides from all of his schematic design package, which he's prepared, which he'll describe to us.
Thanks, Greg and Petra. Thanks, Greg and Petra, for getting us to this most important part of the project. No, I'm kidding. But as an architect, we take a project on, and in this case, we're happy to discover that, in fact, my dad's firm did the drawings back in 1983. So it was great working with those and seeing the name there and finding a whole bunch of details on early drawings like that, like the rainwater leaders. So we're actually good information to start with, although part of our job was to update the existing as-built drawings because they weren't quite what we had to start with. We met with the museum board and Greg and Petra on multiple occasions, came up with this early sketch, some of it which has lasted through the input feedback, and some of the things I'll show you later have changed. We looked at bylaws, we looked at property lines, and I will mention that in a bit as well. And we put together a budget. So the main thing is an expansion on the left-hand side where it says Summerland Museum. That would be the addition, the main part of the addition. And two ways to give you more space, give a building more space, is to make more square footage, which we've done, but also help reorganize the space. Greg mentioned the loading dock, a bit of reorganization there and a roof to cover that. A bunch of changes on the inside. We were pretty comfortable with what is and isn't load bearing, so we've made changes on the inside and really, I think, made some great improvements. We did a cost estimate there. If I move this quickly enough, you won't see the typo. But so the numbers are there with a big healthy contingency, because we know when we get into old buildings, we get surprised. So we think we've avoided some surprises, but I know we'll find others that we won't really know until we open the walls. Greg, did you want to talk about project timeline?
Yeah, okay, thanks, Cal. We started this process back in 2021, and in 2022 made a presentation to council, our initial one. And as we've gone forward, I might refer to my paperwork here because that's harder to read. Through the year, we've worked closely with Cal, and it's been a long process, but a good one, in that we now really understand what we're doing. And Cal has produced those drawings over the summer, and we now have a full set of our schematic drawings. We met with Brad Dolbert and Murray Mullen back in October, and with an introduction to our notion that we're going to be presenting today. And at the same time, we are looking at funding, and that's part of this schedule. Is that back in early December, we applied for some arts infrastructure funding, which will provide us approximately $25,000 for continuing with the design work with Michael John. It obviously won't cover all of his fee, but it'll keep us going for now. And I must say that we're not here asking for money, by the way. We're here to present this, the design. So we're busy working hard on trying to raise money. We're here to present to you, and now we're into the farther end of the schedule, and that subject to council approval today and agreement to proceed, we would like to keep going on the design development process and investigating other issues that may be outstanding. And then we intend to pursue capital funding. That's going to be our goal for the next 3 to 4 or 5 months, 6 months, is to pursue capital funding. We do have some capital funding set aside at the museum that's available in our budgets, but we'll need more. And then, subject to funding, we have to make a decision as to whether or not to proceed with the full construction drawings. And it's going to be kind of it's going like this. We'll pick that point, and we'll be talking to the council about that at the point where we decide to really go full blown on this, if we have sufficient funds. And construction start, these things always take time. It'd be very nice if it could happen in 2024, but it's going to depend very much on our efforts to raise funds this year. And Cal assures me that you can complete the drawings in time to do that, but we'll have to work hard on the funding at the same time. But we are very positive. We just want to keep this process rolling. Okay, Kutcher, do you want to speak to the funding sources? And then move back to Cal. Yeah.
Just very quickly touch on the funding sources. So we have identified several options for us. Thankfully, we do have some money put aside as seed money that then these would complement. So the BC Arts Council, which we've already applied to, and currently we're working on a Canada Cultural Spaces Fund application as well. And I've listed a couple other options that we're exploring.
Okay.
So next is an overall site plan with boring building code issues as well. We've got some zoning analysis as well, and this is hard to read, so I'm just going to go to the next one. That was talked about right through the middle of the proposed expansion. On the east side is a current property line. District owns both sides, so we assume that we'll consolidate or do whatever we need to do to remove that as a potential impediment. And the red line, the second inset red line, is the zoning bylaw setback, so we're right on the setback. So assuming it all would move forward, with support, the building fits and works and meets the zoning bylaw requirements, building code analysis, we're fine. The other little addition is in and around the loading bay. So those are the only two additions. They're both really quite simple. The loading bay is mainly a roof, some support in the roof, and the exhibit area is a straightforward, simple span across the whole opening. So very easy and straightforward, like I say, until you find the surprises. This is a current floor plan in case anybody needs to see it, and our proposed additions, renovations. The blue on the right is the exhibit, basically twice as big, and the loading bay covered area. I'm going to move to a next slide because it's easier to see the exhibit, sort of the details. On the left-hand side, in the reserve collection, we recommend spending a lot of money on one of those very dense, high-capacity storage systems on tracks, with some alcoves for the archives, and that would be totally separated from everything else, so you can have some climate control, some humidity control. That's important for long-term preservation of historically significant items. The shipping and receiving area just beside it there is expanded and cleaned out, so there's room to load and unload and prep. And that's sort of the in-between space. You enter into the middle of the space. There's a little nook for coffee and that kind of a thing that would feed staff areas, would feed the adjacent meeting room, activity space, currently the Tate room. We haven't shown you here where the demolition is. There is some demolition on this, but not a lot. A large office adjacent to the reception desk, so that there's some privacy and security and room for a fair number of people. I understand there's 2 and sometimes 3 people, and maybe even 4 or 5 if you have a couple summer students. Of course, they're probably in the back doing the hard work. No, I'm kidding. And the front entry is not very much changed, although we have modified the bathrooms to give you some accessibility, which is probably fundable separately, but also necessary these days to have accessible washrooms, and a large open retail area in the front of the building. In most library, museum most museum, certainly the ones I've been recently, there's lots of retail space to buy stuff to remember your visit. The temporary exhibits room is sort of a narrow space between the exhibit or the reception area and the large permanent exhibit gallery. And let me just move forward to some building elevations, just so we can document what we're proposing for new and existing, and a couple of renderings. We think there's an opportunity to add a bunch of glass. We had a couple of iterations of this, and this is really quite diagrammatic. It's not a highly rendered image of what it could be, because we've had a few other more exciting ideas, but basically this is what we could do, and how much light you can let into that end room would depend on final decisions on exhibitions. And but I think it would be a great thing if it works, because that way as you arrive into the town through the roundabout, that's what you'd see at night. You could have exhibits inside that you'd actually see as you enter your town. So I think that's basically it for the presentation. So I'm going to step away and we'll entertain questions if you have any. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, all of you. Council, any questions for the delegation? Councillor Trainer.
Thank you for the presentation. It looks really interesting. I also really like the idea of the windows and coming around the roundabout and potentially being able to see what's going on in there. I think that would be really neat. I just have a question. Maybe I missed it, but were you considering an elevator at all in order to get up to the second floor?
We have. Yes, that became quite a discussion over time. And it would be very, very expensive to install. Cal, you mentioned something like 250,000.
By the time at these days, yeah.
These days, yeah, to put it in. That is one dilemma we have. We have the train upstairs, and it's hard to access it. But the elevator was just something that was beyond our scope unless that money was available separately.
Okay, so you can't get like a lift or anything like that? You know, want to?
Yeah. I guess you could do a Garavanta on the stair, perhaps. Would be possible. Okay. But we do have, buggies, mothers with children,
Yeah,
wheelchairs. We really have thought about it a lot, but for the moment, it's not described in the drawings.
okay.
But
Because I know that people in wheelchairs can't get up to see the
No,
train,
no,
unfortunately.
no.
Okay.
Plus, our train guys are getting a bit older as well.
Yeah, I know. My
They're in
dad is
trouble
one of
with
them. He needs an elevator.
We need to help them, yeah. So,
Don't tell him I said that.
yeah, so we've got that in mind. It's just that
Okay.
it's not resolved, and at the moment, it doesn't seem to fit our budgets.
Okay,
but
so right now your plan is to keep the train upstairs?
yes, we have
Okay.
some thoughts on that, but we won't talk about that right now.
Okay,
We have
fair
some
enough.
ideas about where the train could go.
okay, I just have one more quick question.
Oh, sure.
When it comes to funding, have you thought about doing any kind of private fundraising? The things that you listed here are all, provincial grants or federal grants. So, yeah, what about private donations? Some kind
That's
of
always a
campaign?
possibility, and we intend to use this presentation and take it around to various groups in town for that purpose. As for individuals, we're actually planning to have a seminar at the museum to explain to people how they could donate to the museum for all sorts of reasons. We're going to be inviting townsfolk to come to it, and we'll run some seminars on what this is about. And so yeah.
I think it would be a really good opportunity for people in Summerland to learn about this.
Yeah,
Because,
yeah.
we don't renovate our museum very often. And
No,
I think
no.
there would probably be people in Summerland that would like to give. So I
We
think,
could even have an open house
yeah,
and present the thing and talk about it. Yeah,
Great.
we'd like to make that, the more the community becomes involved, the better. That would be terrific, yeah. Good idea, sir. Thank you. Yeah.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Mayor. Actually, I really think that's a great idea to encourage private donations. I find particularly for individual citizens to contribute financially significant amounts often gets their names on exhibits and things, and it's really a legacy in their families. And that might be a really excellent opportunity for the museum moving forward. But actually, my question is about, with the renovation, what types of exhibits are you trying to attract?
Go for it.
This is related to the loading dock then. So for one, we have the Tate collection. So Doreen Tate was a longtime supporter of the museum. And when she passed away, she bequeathed her art collection to us. So it's over 100 pieces of art that were made by Summerland residents. And so that is one thing that we would like to share with other people, toward those art pieces around other places. But also, the Royal BC Museum in Victoria, they do wonderful touring exhibits, which we would love to bring in as well. For example, on natural history topics. Yeah, and it's important to have a proper loading dock so that we can meet those designations. Certain exhibits, certain items cannot be loaned to us because we don't have the proper climate control in place in that loading dock. For example, if we're receiving a shipment and it's raining, there's no covered area to transition from the delivery truck to our back room. So I hope that answers your question.
Just to follow up, so does that mean that we would qualify? I mean, provided that we had the loading dock, would we be able to bring exhibits from the Royal Victoria Museum, the Royal BC? I don't know.
Yeah, that would make us eligible for a wide range of touring exhibits.
Councillor Peak.
Thank you very kindly, Worship. I want to thank the museum for this great presentation, and I want to congratulate them. I've sat on the board, but I've also been a liaison, and I want to say that the concentrated effort and interest and the expansion of the opportunities with the board and the staff from the museum is really, really good. And I think it's going to expand the opportunity within our community for the students and the people of the region, not just Summerland. When I look at the great architectural ideas and as Aaron was talking about whether we could do an elevator or not, and we've all been in on some of that discussion, and having been both the president of the Art Council and liaison there, I know that in the past there's been talk about whether, because we almost have a campus quality in our town between the museum and the art center, the George Riga Cultural Center and the library, that we have this wonderful collection of things in the Memorial Park. that between the art building and the museum, and I don't know whether it could go anywhere, but there have been discussions over time, and Lori may be cogent with this as well, that maybe there's an opportunity to put a skywalk that goes between the two buildings. If we had something like that, an elevator could be connected at one end, which would give an opportunity for both buildings to have an elevator, and we wouldn't be applying twice if we needed an elevator. But there are such great opportunities in Summerland for the expansion of this area, including the museum, that I think the sky's the limit. We keep an eye out for possibilities. We continue the discussion, and we're lucky enough to have very active board and great staff. And I'm so pleased you're here today. And I'm just proud of you. Thank you very much.
So you've got a future project there to work on. Any other questions from council? I was just wondering, go ahead, Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Worship. No, I just wanted to say thank you to Cal Micklejohn, because this is a phenomenal design. Taking the old building that we have and then adding the front foyer area with the loading dock. With the very little square footage that you've added, you've changed the whole look of the building. And I think kudos to you. I think it's a phenomenal design. Thank you.
I was just wondering if it's possible to, or if you're thinking of phasing in the project, if you can do like the extension and then as one phase and then the indoor work in the second phase, and if funding permits.
Yeah,
that.
Cal might talk here too, but we have talked about that because of the funding, nature of the funding process. And Cal's broken the cost down to 3 components for us that we would very much like to do the addition at the end. That's the key start of the whole process. Then we can move all of our artifacts that we have in the storage area over, then proceed with that. And then perhaps the loading dock is the last one we do. But yes, there is an opportunity to do that. And the question will be, Cal has actually suggested the best way to go about this would be to produce all of the construction documents. And then we could tender out components of it as the funding is available. Do you want to add anything to that?
Yeah, I was going to say our approach would be to design it as you want the final thing to look, get a building permit, and then as you have funds or as you need to, you could phase it however you want it to. They're very clearly the addition, the other addition, and the interior renovations. Could be all as one big shutdown, make it all happen, or if you had to, for various reasons, phase it over time.
Okay, sounds good. Councillor Markwell.
Thinking about the private donation aspects of things, and you've had some really generous donations in the past through people's estates.
Right.
And that, maybe that's the preferred way people would like to donate. I don't know. Of course, that would mean it's not going to come today or tomorrow. But also, I guess when you start your campaign, you might want to mention that. But I think people are inspired by seeing what other people have donated as well ahead of them. So I think I would certainly emphasize or talk about the generous donations you've had through the states in the past.
Diane Dirk and Dorothy Tate have both. Have been instrumental in running the museum and keeping it going, and it's a very good idea. That's part of the upcoming seminar we'd like to have. Is partly would be state planning. We'd have a state planner there and just get people interested in the whole process. And it's a very worthwhile thing to do, and people are comfortable with that. I think rather than just writing a check, it gives them something.
And like I said, and I'll say it again, I think people are inspired by what other people have donated. And certainly well worth mentioning. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay, thank you. I think we'll move along here. Thank you very much for your presentation. That's great. Thanks for the update. Yeah. Move on to the next presentation. We have BC Transit, and Chelsea Mosey is online. Chelsea, you're there? You can hear us?
Yes, and can you hear me?
Okay, yeah, I can hear you fine. We'll just turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, everyone. So just bear with me while I share my screen for one moment here. I trust everyone can see that now.
It's all good. Yep.
Okay, great. So good afternoon, Mayor, Council. Thank you so much for having me today. My name is Chelsea Mossy, and I'm the Senior Manager of Government Relations with BC Transit for the Okanagan region. I'm joined today by Tessa Stewart, our Business Development Advisor from our Sales and Revenue team. Tessa's here with me today to listen in on the conversation about the electronic fare collection system and also about the possibility of complimentary transit in Summerland. So today I'll be starting with a brief overview of the BC Transit model and how transit operates in the South Okanagan-Similkameen region and in Summerland in specific. I'll then speak briefly to the ongoing Transit Future Action Plan in the South Okanagan-Similkameen region before talking about our electronic fare collection system, which is branded as UMO, and the possibility of complimentary or free transit in Summerland. So who is BC Transit? We are the provincial authority that's responsible for funding, planning, and operating transit throughout British Columbia outside of Metro Vancouver, where it's operated by TransLink. We provide more than 51 million passenger trips per year in 130 communities, delivered through 88 transit systems. We work in partnership with 58 local government partners, which of course in this case is the District of Summerland, with 18 private management companies, 5 public organizations, and 14 nonprofits. So this slide here is just a quick illustration of our BC Transit partnership model, which I'll speak to in more depth in the next slide. So on the one side of things, we work with the provincial government, who's responsible for setting public policy objectives. And then on the other side, we work with our 58 local government partners who are ultimately responsible for setting the priorities for their transit service, the routes and areas served, as well as the fare structure. And then BC Transit holds the contract with our local operating company, which for the majority of the South Okanagan-Similkameen transit system is Barrie and Smith, and it's Barrie and Smith that delivers the Summerland transit service. So as I said, this is just a bit more detail on the roles and responsibilities of each party under the BC Transit model. So BC Transit is responsible for allocating provincial funding, dispersing it through our transit systems throughout the province. We're also responsible for planning the transit systems to achieve local and provincial objectives, and that's done in partnership with our local government partners. We're responsible for arranging for the operation of transit through contract or partnership, and that is, in this case, our contract with Barrie and Smith. BC Transit procures and owns the fleet, which we then lease to our local government partners. And we're also responsible for other professional services, which we provide through a shared services model. So at BC Transit, I'm supported by a team of subject matter experts ranging from our planning and scheduling teams to marketing, to finance, to safety and training, and so forth. And then our local government partners, that's you, are responsible for setting local funding, and the local funding that you set ultimately determines the amount of transit service that is provided. You're responsible for setting the routes and communities or neighborhoods served and the service levels. So that could be how many days of the week of service you have, and the length of service in a service day. Our local government partners are responsible for setting the local fare structure and also managing the sale of fare products, and responsible for establishing and maintaining bus stops, shelters, and bus stop amenities. Our local operating company is responsible for putting day-to-day transit service on the road, so delivering transit service as per the service specifications in the contract. They're responsible for their own labor relations, collecting fares on behalf of our local government partners, and providing the day-to-day customer service that comes with providing transit service. This slide here shows our legislated funding formula for providing transit services. This comes to us through the BC Transit Act. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the legislated funding formula for conventional fixed route transit. So for our conventional fixed route transit services, the local government or municipal share is 53.31% of transit costs, and the province pays 46.69%. And for our custom transit services, better known as our handy dart services, that's our services for people that have a disability that prevent them from using conventional fixed route transit. The local government share is 33.32%, 58.31%, with the province paying the remaining 66.69%. It's important to note that the local government partner retains 100% of revenues to offset local costs. So because, as you'll see in the next couple slides, transit service in Summerland consists of two services. It's the Route 30 that connects Penticton and Summerland, and that's a conventional fixed route service, as well as some on-request service. We actually use a blended funding formula for your transit service. That's a blend of these two. So the District of Summerland pays 44.28% of transit costs, with the provincial government paying 55.72%. So we work with 4 local government partners in the South Okanagan-Similkameen transit system, which are the District of Summerland, of course, the City of Penticton, the Regional District of Okanagan-Similkameen, and the Town of Princeton. And each local government is responsible for planning and funding the routes and services in their area. And each respective local government partner always also collects all fare revenues from the routes they fund. So this slide here shows information on your transit service in specific, which we call Summerland Paratransit, since it is a blend between conventional fixed route transit and custom transit. So Summerland Paratransit consists of the Route 30 Summerland Penticton, for which you'll see the schedule there. It operates Monday through Saturday. And there's also the on-request door-to-door service, which operates locally in Summerland, as well as into Penticton between Monday and Friday. It's operated by Barry and Smith using 2 buses. In the 21-22 fiscal year, this service utilized 4,100 annual service hours, delivering 9,800 rides. The total cost of Summerland Paratransit in the 21-22 fiscal year was $378,935, with the District of Summerland share being approximately $140,000. Summerland Paratransit collected $24,981 in revenue in the 21-22 fiscal year. And I'll also note that year to date for this current 22-23 fiscal year, Summerland Paratransit is over budget in terms of revenues. So that's a good thing. You're collecting more revenues for your transit services than we had budgeted. So BC Transit and our 4 local government partners are currently in the final stages of a planning process that's known as a Transit Future Action Plan. The goal of the South Okanagan-Similkameen Transit Future Action Plan is to update the 2015 Transit Future Plan, which will help guide decision-making for transit in the South Okanagan-Similkameen region over the next 5 to 7 years. This plan began back in 2021, and it's involved two rounds of public consultation. And the next step of this process is to present the final Transit Future Action Plan to the local councils and the RDOS board for endorsement. So you'll see us back here doing just that in the spring. The Transit Future Action Plan outlines transit service and infrastructure priorities to possibly be implemented, subject to council's discretion, over the next 5 to 7 years. The current version of the Transit Future Action Plan, which will be presented, calls for 14,000 additional annual service hours and at least 4 more buses by 2030. And specific to Summerland, the plan calls for approximately 1,025 more hours plus resources for local Summerland service. BC Transit's very excited to roll out new electronic fare collection technology. This new system will replace end-of-life technology and equipment, and it will introduce contactless tap payment methods that will make it easier and quicker for riders to hop on board the bus. New payment methods will include a mobile app, debit and credit card payments, mobile wallet payments, and reloadable smart cards, which will provide riders with the ability to pick the best payment method for their lifestyle and travel habits. And it's important to note that cash will continue to be accepted. BC Transit entered into an agreement with a company called Cubic, and the platform that we will be using is called UMO. If you recognize the name Cubic, it's probably because they're the longtime vendor for TransLink's Compass Card network, which is used in Metro Vancouver. So currently, although dates are still subject to change, we're planning to roll out this technology in the South Okanagan-Similkameen Transit System in late summer or fall of 2023. It will be implemented in 2 phases, initially enabling mobile app and reloadable smart card payment methods before payment by credit card, debit card, and mobile wallets is enabled. It's important to note that some challenges exist with the current fare structure in the South Okanagan-Similkameen Transit System. Particularly the existence of both a local fare of $2.25 and a regional fare of $4, and the top-up fare that is required when going from a local to a regional service. Since UMO can't accommodate this scenario, a fare review will be required prior to the implementation of UMO, and through this fare review process, complementary transit in Summerland can be explored if that's something that council would like to see. So since fare decisions are the jurisdiction of the local government partners, we'll be coming back to council with more information and recommendations from the fare review at a later date. And so finally, we're aware that Summerland Council is interested in the possibility of looking at making transit free for Summerland residents. And so we're looking to get clarity on what the request is so that we can work with staff to provide you with the best and most relevant information and options. So questions that we have are, would you be looking at making transit free for Summerland residents only? And if so, would it be your intention that they ride for free throughout the whole South Okanagan-Similkameen Transit System, or only in the service, or only on the services that the District of Summerland funds? And if it's only on the services that the District of Summerland funds, would people ride free on the fixed route service only, or also on the on-request service? So if you're looking to make transit free for Summerland residents, this would likely involve a fare product, and there would be administration requirements that would be put on the District of Summerland to issue these passes. It's likely that if we proceeded with this option, we'd be looking to launch the free transit for Summerland residents shortly after the implementation of UMO, our electronic fare collection. If you wanted to make transit complimentary on the Route 30 Summerland-Penticton, this is fairly straightforward and could be implemented almost any time. But of course, this would make transit free for anyone riding this route, not just for Summerland residents. So when considering how to proceed, I'd recommend considering the foregone revenue and what else could be done with these revenues, such as potentially implementing expansion priorities that you'll see outlined in the Transit Future Action Plan, or you could go back and have a look at the 2015 Transit Future Plan, and to also think ahead if implementing to planning for increased demand and the funding that may be required to expand service if making transit free does significantly increase ridership. Finally, I just want to highlight that with the implementation of UMO, a revenue sharing agreement will be required between the 4 local government partners in the transit system. And if council's desire is to make transit free for Summerland residents throughout the whole transit system, we'd have to look at how the other local government partners could be compensated for Summerland residents riding for free through this revenue sharing agreement. And that is everything I have today. So I'll open it up for questions or comments, and I will also stop sharing my screen.
Okay, thank you very much. I'll open to questions. I would like to talk about the free thing myself, since I'm the one who proposed it before the election. The thinking and the discussion at the time was to start with Route 30 almost as a trial, a trial period, just to see how it would work. And I think the thinking is, just for Summerland residents, perhaps they could have they come into City Hall, show that their driver's license or their identification, prove their residency, and get a free annual pass or something like that, if that would work. Whatever's kind of simple. We had a lot of discussion on whether we should just make it free for everybody or not. There were some concerns about what might be coming the other way from Penticton. So, and since it's Summerland that's paying for this service, then there is some logic just to make it available for Summerlanders. So that was kind of the thinking, and the thinking is that we, to trial it for a year or so to see what happens, and hopefully it would drive up ridership and make people more aware. But and address affordability issues, and there's lots of reasons why. But that was the thinking. Other councillors may have other thoughts on that. Maybe we could cover this topic first, and then we'll go back to other questions that we might have. Anyway, Councillor Barkwell, then Councillor Betts.
I certainly like the idea of making it free. And the other part that I like is making it simple. And what I envisioned was step on the bus in Summerland and it's not going to cost you anything. I think it would be simpler if you didn't worry about the occasional person who maybe wasn't a resident of Summerland. That would remove a certain amount of administration. But I guess the complication would be, it depends on where you're going. You want to have, it's more than just Route 30, is it? Like, you could step on the bus in Summerland and then go to different places, and then that they have different costs, and so you don't know what we should be doing, or is that the complication?
I think that's exactly, oh, sorry, through the chair. I think that's exactly the question that we're looking to get answered. One of the questions is it just the Route 30, or once people are in Penticton, if it is the Route 30 that we're looking to make free, would they then have to pay to get on other routes from there, or are you looking for them to travel for free throughout the South Okanagan-Similkameen transit system? And I would assume that the other local government partners who fund the other routes would be looking to be compensated in some way if you're looking to make transit free throughout the region for your residents.
Go ahead.
So I think the obvious solution is to say, at least start with just to Penticton. And is that simple to do then?
So through the chair, the simplest is to make the entire Route 30 free for everybody, because in that case, we just tell the operator to stop collecting fares. I had our finance team look into it, and they estimated that the annual revenue loss would be approximately $20,000 if you were to make the Route 30 free. And that is very straightforward and could be implemented almost immediately. But of course, because that route goes into Penticton, there would also be benefits for Penticton residents to doing so.
If it was free for everybody, could you still track the numbers?
Through the chair, yes, we could.
Councillor Betts.
Thank you, through the chair. Actually, I think Councillor Burkwell, that was exactly my question, was how do we connect into Penticton? So I'm just trying to look at slide number 9, more larger. So if our residents were going to connect to Penticton, can you tell me what are the Penticton city fares? And I'm just trying to find, I'm literally trying to get into the slide to see where it lands, where it ends, the destination in Penticton. I can't see. Thank you, sorry.
No problem. Through the chair. So I'm actually going to have a look. I believe that one moment. I believe it goes to Cherry Lane, but I will just double check that as well. I believe it goes to Cherry Lane and Wade and Martin. One moment. And then just while I have a quick look at this, the fare once people arrived in Penticton would be dependent on what type of route they're looking to connect onto. So as I mentioned earlier, if they're looking to ride a local route within the city of Penticton, the fare is $2.25. And if they're looking to connect onto another regional route, such as potentially like the Route 40 that would connect them through to Osoyoos, then it would be a $4 fare. And it's a $5 fare for the Route 70 that takes people into Kelowna.
To follow up with that, so what do residents of either community, say Penticton right now, what do they pay if they are using the bus, get to Cherry Lane and are coming to Summerland? Are they paying 2 fares right now? Or do they pay an additional fare to come to Summerland?
My apologies. Sorry, I was just having a look at the schedule. So it does terminate at Cherry Lane Shopping
Okay.
Center in Penticton, and you can also stop at the Penticton Regional Hospital. And then can you just repeat that question once more?
Of course. For riders who are getting on, say, using the Penticton bus system and then getting on the 30 to Summerland, do they pay an additional fare right now? Is there?
It would depend whether so it's a $4 fare for the Route 30. If they were previously riding local routes in Penticton, which is $2.25, they would have to pay a top-up fare to get a transfer onto the Route 30. Otherwise, it's a $4 fare.
Thank you.
Councillor Peak, then Councillor Patton.
Thank you very much, Your Worship. Myself and Councillor Betts were not on the past council, so I haven't had any discussion about free fares. When I look at the idea of free fare is very interesting. It's a little intricate, and I'm wondering, not so much the foregone costs, because obviously you can calculate that easily. It's the foregone costs in the future should ridership go up. And if you did it for a free trial for a year, you'd have some idea where you were at. So I just need to, I need to get my head around what that opportunity might be. I appreciate the answer to the questions in terms of the costs of the fare, because I don't normally travel the bus. I have a couple of times. So I appreciate the fact that it might be an add-on for people coming from Penticton. I could see the sense in having a no fare we want to increase the ridership. We want to help the people that are more vulnerable. So the idea of a free ridership from Summerland to Penticton for local residents seems very attractive, both to increase the ridership and to give the opportunity for people that don't have a lot of money to maybe get to their jobs or get to the hospital or go to doctor's appointments or that kind of stuff. And then it's the discussion about what it would cost for Penticton people to come here, because that's another opportunity. That's an economic opportunity for our community as well. And after we finish the discussion on free ridership, I have a couple of questions around assets and acquiring more buses or whatever, but I'll leave that for the moment because that will just complicate it more. But I appreciate better understanding. Thank you, Catherine.
Okay, it sounds like we need more discussion amongst ourselves before we come back to you about this, which we will do. Councillor Patton?
Thank you, Worship. Can you tell me, do we have statistics on the demographics right now that take the bus from Summerland to Penticton or Penticton back to Summerland?
Through the chair, we would have a bit of demographic information based on the type of fare products that are being used. However, it's not overly granular, and that is something that will be improved significantly with the implementation of the electronic fare collection system that's coming later this year. So high level, we could provide something, but it's not excellent granular data at this point.
Thank you so much.
Councillor Traynor?
I'm just wondering, has this type of service, so free service, been offered in any other community around BC? And if so, do you know how it was? Was it successful? Did more people ride the bus?
Through the chair, we have implemented free transit in a couple scenarios. Currently, the resort municipality of Whistler offers free transit service on a couple of their routes, and that's really to get people that are living in certain areas that are there for seasonal work back to their homes, accommodations in the evening or throughout the day. That has been, from my understanding, a quite successful service. However, ultimately what we see in the transit industry when it comes to considering the implementation of free fares is that there can be an increase in ridership due to making transit fares complimentary. However, you'll see an increase in ridership that is either as significant or more significant through just ensuring that transit service is reliable and frequent throughout the day, because people are willing to pay a bit of a fare as long as transit is frequent enough for it to meet their transportation needs.
It's kind of a chicken and egg thing, though. I mean, you can't make it more frequent until you have more riders, and you need more riders to make it more frequent. I just have one thing on the schedule and the route. There's actually 2 stops in Penticton that the Route 30 stops at, and it's not on the map or it's not on the schedule. One is at the Tim Hortons when you first arrive into Penticton, and one in front of the Penticton Rec Center. And I think if people were aware that the bus actually stopped there, that might be more attractive to people. So I'm just wondering if it's possible to get those 2 stops onto the map.
Thanks, Your Worship. I can check with our marketing team. How our schedules generally work is that we just post our timing points on the schedules. We can't post all of the stops due to just limitations with space in marketing materials. But if there's a reason to get more stops posted there, then I will look into what we can do.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions from council? Councillor Peak.
Are we just confining this to the opportunity for free travel, or are we going?
No, I think we'll move on from the free travel. We'll have that discussion amongst ourselves and get back to BC Transit on that. But
so if I could do a subsequent question on the presentation.
Yep.
So it was about the assets and looking at the fact that as things move along, having fare set differently, done differently, that there would be an acquisition of 2 buses, I think it said. And how that cost impacts our share of what goes forward. So if I could have some understanding of that, would certainly help.
Of course. So through the chair, there are currently 2 buses that are being used or that are being leased by the District of Summerland to provide Summerland paratransit service. So within those annual costs that you saw are lease fees for 2 buses. And so when you see your transit future action plan that you will see, there are some expansion priorities outlined in there. And those expansion priorities, if the hours are sufficient enough, will come with a required number of buses. And then we go through what we call our transit improvement program. And that's our program through which we secure funding from both provincial government and local government for for funding. And we also procure buses through that process as well. So we'll be looking to start our expansion process through which we would be procuring buses for any requested expansions within the next couple of months. And that would be for expansions in the 24-25 fiscal year through to the 2026-27 fiscal years, if that answers your question.
It goes a long ways to it. Thank you.
Okay.
I have a question about additional service within Summerland itself, or more of a local service within Summerland. I know in the Soyuz they have kind of an extension of the regional service, and they have the same bus does a loop around a Soyuz before it continues on. And is that something that we would be able to look at with our own existing buses? Would we have the capacity to do something like that?
That would be, I believe that there is an initiative in your Transit Future Action Plan looking at the addition of local service within Summerland. When that is confirmed as a priority for council, it then goes to our fleet team who does a calculation as to the fleet requirements for that. So I don't know yet what it would depend on the number of hours of service annually that are being provided within the District of Summerland. And then I'd be able to better answer that question. But my assumption is that it would probably require another bus.
Okay, thank you. And just also on that, is it, does it happen anywhere where the routes change depend on the season? Would you have like a seasonal service where you might have stops because they're popular in the summer, and you wouldn't have them in the winter? Or like in our case in Summerland, you know, we might want the bus to loop along the lake and come up the hill, but if it was a day like today, it wouldn't make it up the hill. So.
Absolutely. We do seasonal adjustments in lots of our transit systems. For example, the Route 10 Naramata-Penticton offers more service in the months of July and August than it does for the rest of the year.
Thank you. Good to know. Councillor Betts.
I just think that actually could be really attractive, even in conjunction with a potential free transit on the 30, just looking at furthering business opportunities in Summerland for having staff. Sometimes the staff employment opportunities are limited by people who can't get here. So having an extended route in the summer might actually benefit a lot of different businesses getting staff to their locations. Thank you.
I have one further question, I guess. If we were to trial a free service on Route 30, I'm not sure how to word this, but how do you, I guess, now control people in cities? I mean, I've seen them in Vancouver and Victoria, people who get onto the bus that you don't want to have on the bus. And so we wouldn't necessarily have that problem in Summerland, but we might in Penticton. If you understand what I'm saying, and how do you deal with that?
We never want to put our operators in a situation where they're in a possible conflict. So for the most part, unless it's a scenario in which there is a possibility of something unsafe in which a transit supervisor would be called to ask that person to leave the bus, then that person, for the most part, will be able to ride for board and ride for free.
Okay, thank you. I don't see any other questions, so I'll thank you both for attending, and that was a lot of good information for us to chew over.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to public comment opportunity. Is there anybody online? No. Business item 7.1, and I'll turn this over to Fire Chief Robinson if he's, yep, there he is. Forest Enhancement Society of BC Fuel Management Grant.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, councillors. Kendra, are you going to read what I had to do today? No? Okay, thanks. I was hoping this would be a lot easier for me to remember because I got so much going on. So there was a little bit of administration error of about $49,000. Not by me, maybe I missed a page. So what I'm looking for is just to get your approval to add the $49,618.50, so it equals the $39,168.50. This is 100% grant funded, and just looking to, the more money I can get approval for is the more money that can be worked in the northwestern part of the town. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Trainer.
I'll move the recommendation unless anybody else has a question.
Councillor Patton, that's the, to approve the, we can't get it up on the screen, eh?
So it's just a revised grant application.
It's just a
That's
revision.
correct.
To add
Yes.
49,000?
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
Any discussion? I'll call the question. Councillor Patton, got it, yep. All in favor? That carries.
Thank you.
Thank you. Move on to 7.2, Green and Inclusive Communities Building Grant. Director of Community Services.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The purpose of this report is for council to consider the opportunity for the District of Summerland to submit an application to the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Program for funding support for the Recreation Centre project. The Government of Canada announced that the Green and Inclusive Community Buildings Program is launching its second scheduled intake. This is a national merit-based program with the objective of improving the availability and condition of community buildings in Canadian communities experiencing higher needs and who are currently underserved. At the same time, the program helps to stimulate the economy while creating good job opportunities and aligning to the goals of Canada's Strengthened Climate Plan. The program advances the government's climate priorities by improving energy efficiency, reducing GHG emissions, and enhancing the climate resilience of community buildings. The Government of Canada announced up to $1.5 billion in federal funding over 5 years to establish the GICB program. The program supports retrofits, repairs, or upgrades to existing publicly accessible community buildings and the construction of new publicly accessible community buildings that serve the underserved and high-need communities across Canada. The scheduled competitive intake for large retrofits and new buildings are for projects that range in the size from 3 to 25 million in total eligible costs. Projects in excess of 25 million may be considered on a case-by-case basis. The application deadline is February 28th, and projects must be effectively delivered by March 31st, 2026. The construction standards for new buildings must be built to net zero carbon or built to be net zero carbon ready. The program will fund 60% of the first $10 million of the project costs and 50% of the remaining project costs. It does not indicate if there is a maximum funding contribution, so we are looking into that. If council is interested in considering a net zero carbon build or net zero carbon ready recreation center building, it is recommended that staff engage the appropriate consultants to complete the requirements for a grant application to the GIBC program. Staff are currently reaching out to consultants to get an estimate on consulting fees, and will follow up with obtaining quotes to complete this work if council would like to proceed. It is anticipated that the consultants will come back to council prior to the grant application deadline to discuss the initial assessment between net zero carbon build and net zero carbon ready. It is noted that an application is scored less for a net zero carbon ready project versus a building that is fully operational as a net zero carbon building at the end of construction. While the increase of construction costs from the current project cost estimate to build the facility to be net zero carbon built or ready is unknown at this time, it is anticipated that the District of Summerland, if they are successful in obtaining funding from the GICB program, the overall project costs required for the district will be reduced. Staff are also corresponding with the grant representatives with questions and gathering information to ensure that this project will meet the grant objectives. As council is aware, we are still awaiting the results of the UBCM Strategic Priorities Fund grant application for $6 million for the Recreation Centre project. It is anticipated that the announcements will be made in the spring of 2023. Council may want to consider delay initiating a referendum until the results of the UBCM or the GICB grants have been announced. However, it is important to highlight that the LTA cost consultants have indicated that project delays could increase the construction costs of 1.25% for every 3 months the schedule is pushed out. The LTA consultants have indicated that it is too difficult to respond with a value to construct a net zero carbon building, as it is too early in the design with no mechanical, electrical, and structural consultants engaged. They stated it could be upwards in the 15 to 20% range, depending on how that is achieved. And they said that removing the LEED Silver standard may result in a 2 to 3% reduction of the current estimate for the project. And I just quickly want to note that I am gathering details regarding the project cost exclusions as per council's request from the last council meeting, and will provide a report with those details at a future council meeting. So with that, that concludes my report. I'm happy to answer questions, and we have Odessa here as well, who has been doing lots of research into this program to answer some questions. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you. So just to clarify then, the discussion, the continuation of the discussion we had previously and the questions that council had, that's still to come to us.
Correct.
So what we're dealing with now is the grant application. Yeah, okay, thank you. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Worship. My question is, how, since it has to go for referendum, we don't even know if we're going to be proceeding with this project. How can we apply for a grant when it's a substantial grant, when we don't have the community backing behind us to do it? So would that not look, that doesn't look favorable, I would assume, with the federal government, if you don't have the your municipal, your citizens backing to move forward this, and yet we're putting in a grant for so much money. So I'm having a bit of a hard time wondering, are we putting the cart before the horse in this case? Thank you.
Through the mayor, good question. It is a challenge that we had with the $6 million grant that we also applied for. And we did indicate in the grant application that if we are successful, we are going forward with a referendum in the coming months. And that was acceptable to apply for that particular grant. And we anticipate that will be the same for this grant. However, we have a list of questions that we are reaching out to the funders to get details on, and we will add that to our list.
Thank you. My second question is on our presentation at the last council meeting on the 12th of December, the consultants did talk about LEED Gold. When the consultants talked about LEED Gold and getting us to net zero ready, and they also talked about step 3 in regards to the BC building code. But my question being is they've told you now that they don't have enough information to let us know what the cost increase could be based on that they don't have enough information. So I'm kind of wondering why we got this report that talks about gold, LEED Gold. We also had the design standard for the ZCB, but now when we're asking further questions in regards to that design, they're telling us that they don't have enough information. Thank you.
Thank you, through the mayor. So as far as the LTA consultants' costing of the project, they were provided a schematic design from the architects of the project and completed a cost estimate. Based on that, after we followed up to ask them, what standard does that fall within? And they confirmed that it meets the LEED Silver standard. And if we were to look at what the additional costs would be for a net zero building, it would take a substantial amount of more design work. And we were not prepared at that time to do the extra design work in order to get those cost estimates at the time of that stage of the project. They were able to estimate based on what they've seen in other net zero buildings, but in order to provide a more detailed cost estimate, they weren't able to provide that at this time. If we were to go forward with this grant application, we are also reaching out to some consultants that we're hoping would be able to provide us, based on their work on the grant application, is coming up with costing a better cost estimate and doing some more detailed digging into the project to be able to provide a project cost increase. I'm not sure if that answers your question.
So as far as the consultant's fees that you'd be looking for on whatever consultant you're talking in regards to net zero ready, not net zero, but net zero ready is what I would assume would have to be, because I can't see the aquatic center using and creating the same amount of energies, but that's discussion for another day. Is that going to be coming forward in budget? The fees that we may be looking at, additional fees for consultants for going into this.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. We do have, and we've allocated $100,000 for consulting fees each year over several years. So that is in the budget for 2023 for consulting fees. So if we were to proceed with this work, with working with the consultants, it would come out of that budget line item in our capital.
Thank you.
CAO, have a comment?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and to council and through to also Councillor Patton in particular. Another thing that's been on my mind, and I haven't had a chance to follow up really with Lori yet or Odessa, but part of the zero-based design is this offset. So this idea of a carbon-free alternative energy source, a carbon-free alternative energy product that is essentially offsetting those other emissions. One of the things I wonder about, and I think we have to talk to the consultants about, is if it's a possibility if we can use the solar project that we're currently building as that alternative energy source. Like, does it have to be on site, or can it be a dedicated net new energy source that is carbon free that we'd also be currently bringing on in parallel? So if that's the case, you know, it could be that we might be a lot of the way there already just with what we're able to bring on in terms of our solar power. So something we'll look at.
Councillor Peak.
Thank you, Your Worship. Good discussion. Several of the questions I had in mind, Councillor Patton has asked. And I see the opportunity to look for net zero in this building. And I would like the continued exploration to see that happening. I understand that we have the $100,000 in this budget and going forward to be able to do certain things. I appreciate the question as to whether we have the opportunity, not having done a referendum. I understand what Lori had to say about this. The point that I was going to say Councillor Stat, but CEO Stat made in terms of off-site carbon-free offset would be a possibility, but I know there are really good solar products for actually constructing buildings that could make a big difference in terms of our cost. So I like the idea of looking for some funding to continue the opportunity of doing a better building should our constituency be interested in doing that. I think that a building that works into the future in a way that makes sense and cuts down on carbon emissions is the kind of building that any municipality should be doing. So I agree with the discussion and I appreciate the answers you gave, Lori.
Councillor Trainer.
Yeah, I'm definitely in support of exploring this grant. I think that the public really expects us to explore all grants that we can, and to be able to say that we've looked at everything in order to try to bring the cost down for this project. This project is really important for our community, and so I want to make sure we do everything we can. And so I think going to apply for grants, even though we don't necessarily have the approval yet, is good, because then when we do go to referendum, we can say, look what we've done. Hopefully we'll get some of those grants so we can lower that price. And then the referendum question is a lower amount, which people may or may not be more accepting of. So I think it's a really great idea, and I'll bring forward the recommendation to apply for this. Unless anybody else has a question.
I think let's exhaust the questions first.
Okay.
Okay. Councillor Barkwa.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I would go further from what Councillor Trainer said, and maybe we don't want to wait for a response on this application. It could be quite a while. And to move things along faster, put a referendum forward that it was only for the amount necessary and under the assumption of receiving this grant. But that's maybe a question that we'll deal with a little bit later. But I went back and reviewed the December's report a little more carefully because it had a bit more information, detail about the construction types, the zero-based one, and I had to wonder how the heck you can ever get a pool to be zero-based with all the operational energy inputs for maintaining a pool. You'd have to have acres of solar panels, and I really like CEO Stat's suggestion maybe as an offset, because I don't know how else the heck we would ever reach that kind of a level. The original report said a 1 to 5% increase for zero-based. That was probably optimistic, obviously. And it doesn't surprise me that it's more like, say, 15% more. But it does seem, considering the amount of money that we would get from the feds, well worth pursuing. I would pay the extra to get the extra. I think everybody's thinking along the same lines, and that's one way to put it. But specifically at a question, could you go to page 3 and the examples there and help me understand this table? Okay, the first one is project cost, net zero, construction zero, max grant contribution. So that's sort of the status quo. And then example, project cost $50 million, net zero construction 1 million. What's that about? Because the 26 million and 24 million in grant and district contributions equals the 50 million on the left.
Thank you for the question through the mayor. Just to answer your first question before getting into the table, one of the components that to help us get to net zero is geothermal, which may be probably our best solution to getting us there. So that's what we've heard from some of the consultants. To answer your question on the table here, the net zero construction, that's an increase. What we're saying, what we're adding to the 49 million. So adding a $1 million for some base level. So it's just an example, as if you add 1 million to the project, if you add 6 million to the project, you add.
So if it was only 2% more to be net zero, it'd only be $1 million more. And okay, so, but it could be up to, say, 20% more. 11 million bucks. Yeah, okay. And right, so that's sort of the net gains. I get it. Thanks.
Councillor Trainer, want to bring forward the motion?
I will bring forward the resolution as presented. Do you want me to read it out?
No, we're
Good. I have Granola
get it
bar
up
in
on
my
the
mouth.
supposed to get up on the screen. Okay, that's to support the application. Seconder, Councillor Peak. Any further discussion? No, I think this is a good idea. As Councillor Trainer said, go ahead.
If we apply for this, then what does that mean for our time schedule in terms of a referendum? Like, would we have a future discussion about that? When you bring back more information, I guess, at the next meeting? Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, that's all. The referendum still to be discussed. Yeah. Yep, Councillor Betts.
Thank you, through the mayor. Do we have an idea when the decisions would be made on this grant that's being offered?
Through the mayor, you're referring to the results if we are successful of receiving the funding? Yes, we don't know. We anticipate it could take probably 8 months to a year to find out, but it's on our questions to ask. And it really, the funders usually say, depending on how many applications they receive, will drive how long the schedule will be. But I would say 8 months to a year.
Right. Well, still, it's valuable. I mean, if it was worth that kind of money, it's worth waiting for. But
CEO Stat.
Thank you, through the mayor. Just on the other one, the $6 million, which is the gas tax grant, I think we're thinking this spring we should hear back. Yeah. So, and that's been, about a year. But at least we should hear that one hopefully sooner rather than later.
Councillor Barkwell?
Does the gas tax people, do they care if we got additional grants through this green community project?
I'll try to answer that through the mayor. There are instances where gas tax will not allow you to stack, but we would need to go back and look at the actual application guide in order to determine whether or not that was a component of their criteria or not. So we could probably write that question down, and when we come back at the next council meeting, have a definitive answer for you.
In some respects, it's kind of a moot point because you'd be willing to forego the 6 million if you could get the 25, right?
Potentially, yes.
Is this program, you apply directly to the federal government, or do you go through the province?
It appears to be federal, direct to the feds.
So maybe some lobbying with our MP might be on order. Okay, so yeah, no, I definitely, let's go for it. Let's, I think there's, as Councillor Trainer said, there's an expectation for us to build green, and there's an expectation for us to find as much funding, so it's not, the whole burden's not on the taxpayers. So I'll call the question. No, all good.
Just got the answer on stacking. If you're still interested, it's in the program criteria. It says that it's eligible for 100% federal stacking, and the maximum amount permitted from all federal government sources is 100% of eligible costs. So we'll do a double check on the gas tax side, but certainly from the green and inclusive building side, it's saying that it's stackable.
It's always good to be stackable. I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries. Bylaw Enforcement Officer appointment, Director of Development Services.
Yes, thank you. Quick report. Basically, under the community charter, council is required to appoint their bylaw enforcement officers in order to issue a ticket under our bylaw notice enforcement bylaw. I just want to also, at this opportunity, introduce Kevin Atkinson as a new bylaw enforcement level 2, as well as licensing inspector under our business licensing bylaw. So Kevin joins us from the city of Colwood, to over a 20-year career in bylaw enforcement, primarily with Vancouver Island municipalities, but we're happy to introduce him to the Okanagan. Unfortunately, the weather has not been great for his introduction to the Okanagan, but hopefully he'll experience some of that wonderful weather in the summertime here with us. So welcome, Kevin.
Welcome. Council, any questions? Councillor Peak?
What size was the community that you worked in, or that you worked in the past, Kevin?
I worked in several communities as small as 5,000 persons in a community up to 17,000. At City of Colwood, we had a very large community there. So it's been diverse. I've worked in another regional district just to further my knowledge as well. So I've worked in all the communities, size communities, but I prefer working in the smaller communities. They're more personable. You get to know the people you're dealing with on a regular basis. You get to know the person in the coffee shop. So that's where my joy is dealing with those kind of people.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you. Councillor Barkwell.
For Kevin's benefit, I'll point out that our previous bylaw officer worked for the district for about 45 years. So it's probably not a bad place to work. Yeah.
I know that gentleman very well.
Okay, somebody like to bring forward the motion? Councillor Peak. Second, Councillor Patton. All in favor? And that carries. Thank you. Thank you. So we're at the break. Right on time. 2:35, is that enough time? No, it's 2:30. Or does people need more? 2:40? 2:40. Okay, 2:40. See you back. Okay, let's get started. Okay, welcome back. 7.5, Section 57 notice. I'll turn this over to the Director of Development Services. Thank you.
Thank you. So council has seen this item before. It came before council on November 28th. We came before council seeking resolution to provide notice at that point in time to the property owners for the property located at 13206 Kelly Avenue, which is right across the street from the pool, the current pool location. And it's also the current location of the Kettle Valley Denture Clinic. We provided further background in our original report to council on November 28th as to the outstanding code deficiencies for this building, specifically relating to a residential suite that was constructed at some point in time after a building permit was submitted for some revisions in 2008. Originally was the last building permit, which we issued. Following council's meeting of November 28th, which council did provide the resolution for us to provide that notice to the property owner under the community charter for registering a Section 57 notice on title. We did provide hand delivery notification as well as a voicemail to the property owners. And at the time of this report, when it was written, we didn't hear back from the owners, but I did have a phone call with the daughter of the owners just last week after the agenda was posted. There is an update to council's package, attachment number 3, that provides some additional background information, as well as my most recent discussion with the daughter of the current property owners for council's information. So Section 57 of the community charter provides the ability of a building inspector to provide notice to the landowner that that something's unsafe with regards to the BC Building Code or a Building Act in general. It can be put into place if there's a health and safety condition that they think is unsafe, or if there's been work to a building that should have required a building permit. And that's the case in this situation, that there should have been a building permit to put in a residential suite within a commercial building, but that those inspections, as well as the building permit process, never proceeded. There was some, it's clear from the inspectors, inspections from both the building official and the fire inspector, that though there are some modifications that are required to bring the existing residential suite into conformance with the BC Building Code. So that's why we are recommending that Section 57 be placed on title, and that a building permit would be recommended to deal with any of the non-compliance situations to remove that Section 57. But I'm happy to take any questions on this if council wants. Thank you.
Thank you, Red. Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Your Worship. I want to thank you for the addendum. I did talk to our CAO last week, and it was nice to see you had the occupancies and whatnot put into this. The issue I have is your last paragraph of your addendum, where it says that with the recommendation that you will be proceeding with the recommendation to council, but will not move forward. Unfortunately, this forum right now, you don't have that authority. So right now we're a quasi-judicial members that are set up to create that process for the Section 57. So that we don't move forward with this in this regard, what I would like to do, it says in here that the property owner's daughter will be coming forward in the next few weeks. What I would suggest is that we just table this and I'm open, whether it be 60 days, whatever, to give the owners the opportunity to come forward with a decommissioning permit, because that's exactly what it's going to be, is to decommission the secondary or the dwelling unit within that. And that way, it's fully transparent. We've given them and we've done the due diligence that we had. We've had staff bring it forward. Staff has said to us, we have a problem. We can't get them to the table. They have come to the table. So it's up to us to decide if we want to give that leniency to them for a time period before we bring forward and attach that Section 57 on title. So that is what I would like to propose, is that I do a motion that we give these owners 60 days to come forward, to have their documentation in place for their decommissioning permit. And if that happens, then it's great. We don't move forward. If it doesn't happen, then we can go forward with Section 57. Thank you.
So you're bringing forward that motion to defer for 60 days?
Yes, please, if
Okay.
I may, Your Worship.
Anybody want to second that? Councillor Peak. Now, corporate officer, can we discuss a motion to defer, or? Can, okay. So the motion's on the table. Any discussion or questions? Councillor Barkwell.
So at this late date, after years, it looks like, of back and forth with these owners, we get a representation from the daughter, who we can't really be sure if she's an authorized agent or not, can we? But I'll continue. Save that question. That they're going to decommission. You know, all she said was that there wasn't going to be any occupancy. I didn't see here that she undertakes to decommission the location. Does that mean taking out all the things you would use as a like stoves and sinks and things, or is she simply going to say, oh, nobody's going to be there, and yet there could easily be people there? So I think that's kind of a dangerous route to take. Well, not that dangerous, because 60 days we can look at it, but I think that we might still need the Section 57 unless, you know, we do see this full decommissioning, and I'm not sure what that means. So I would like to hear, yes, the Director of Development Services opinions on this.
Go ahead.
Through your worship to Councillor Barkwell. You know, in terms of what my conversation with the daughter, I didn't get a formal agent authorization from her, but it did, at least from my communication with her, she did seem like she was the daughter of the landowners. So that we'd have to confirm that still, but I'm pretty confident of that. The direction that she informed me was that her plan was to not decommission the suite, but rather bring it into compliance with the BC Building Code. So that would be the intention of the building permit that she would submit, is to bring it into compliance with the BC Building Code. So although she did advise that January 16th, there will be no occupancy until that building permit is achieved. And so, yeah, I don't know if that's information for, I won't give you my opinion on whether to proceed with or don't proceed on tabling. It's entirely council's decision. I would say that we do have to provide notice to the landowner when we are considering a resolution to proceed with a Section 57. So if we do defer it 60 days, then we would have to provide notice again to the owners at that council meeting where we're considering the placing of the Section 57. But that would be the only thing.
Councillor Patton and then Councillor Betts.
Thank you, Your Worship. So when I was speaking of decommissioning, it was a business and personal services, which is a D occupancy, and they brought in the residential, which is a C, and that's where the code implications come into play, is the residential component to the business and personal services. So whether they decommission, which means that they would take the residential suite out, but as Mr. Delvaux said, that they want to keep that. So then it would just be a building permit to bring it back up to code. One of the things that in regards to that, the whole purpose behind the Section 57 is to bring it to light and to bring it to the owners, and that the owner knows that now that it is in front of council, we have taken the responsibility and we have taken that from staff to say, you know what, you didn't do what you're supposed to do. So this is why the Section 57 goes on, so that it puts us as the council on the ones that are making that decision on it. So, but the other point is that it's an education process. They didn't respond. Absolutely, they didn't respond, but now they have. So I don't think that we can ignore the intent that they want to now proceed. So anyways, I'm having verbal diarrhea. I do apologize.
Okay. Councillor Betts.
Thank you, through the mayor. I just think that I agree with Councillor Patton. The intention at this time, despite the delays, which have been frustrating, but at the end of the day, even if we wait 60 days and put that formalized in the motion, that we will revisit in case it's just a delay tactic, but provided that they are moving forward with good intention at this point, I don't think it harms us in any way, because if they delay and there's an incident in their home, it's their insurance which is going to be invalidated and not our due diligence for safety. So I don't see a problem in giving that window to try and get a proper business or the license. Thank you.
If Section 57's put on them now, what would they have to do? What would be required to have it removed?
I think there would be another subsequent resolution by council to remove this Section 57, and then follow with us going to land titles with a release of that Section 57. So there would be some paperwork involved in processing the removal, but probably another council report.
Okay, thank you. Any Councillor Peak?
Thank you very much, Your Worship. I want to thank Brad for getting us educated around bringing this forward and the follow-up on it, because it's an education for us as council as to where it goes, and the background that Councillor Patton brings to this discussion is important as well. I think the opportunity to table this seems much more sensible. We don't get into that paperwork bit, and we don't need a make work project. We just want to make sure that our community in this building is safe and that all those things are followed up properly. So I think the tabling of this particular project or Section 57 opportunity gives us that time, that lead time, as Councillor Betts says, to see if in fact the people that are involved are honorable in what they want to follow through with. Thank you, Worship.
Okay, thank you. So I'll call the question. All in favor of the motion? That carries. Moving on, 7.6, OCP amendment, property on Lakeshore Drive. I'll turn this over to our planning technician, Shannon Tui.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. The district's received an official community plan amendment and also a rezoning application to facilitate a 4-lot subdivision at the property at 12010 Lakeshore Drive. This subject property is zoned the medium density lot, which is our RSD1, and as designated in the OCP as low density residential. The purpose of the application is to consider an official community plan amendment, as well as a rezoning for a portion of the 12010 Lakeshore Drive South to accommodate a 4-lot free simple subdivision by the applicant. The proposal is that 3 lots be rezoned to our RSD1I and 1 lot to remain RSD1. The low-density residential intensification designation is intended to accommodate infill development within mature neighbourhoods with access to existing infrastructure. The OCP encourages this with the placement of low-density residential to be fully serviced. Increased density from 15 to 28 units per hectare. This application seeks to rezone 3 of the 4 lots that are proposed for the subdivision from RSD1 to RSD1I. The RSD1I provides a zone that accommodates redevelopments of single detached housing on small urban lots, not unlike the ones already seen in Lower Town. And these provide, the zone is intended to create that infill opportunities. The RSD1I does require an amenity contribution of $5,000 per lot that is rezoned to RSD1I. This $5,000 would be put towards parks, culture, recreation, or the fire department. And this is for people who are trying to reduce their lot size from the 12 metres of RSD1 down to the 9 metres. As you can see in the proposed subdivision, the applicant wishes to subdivide the property into the 4 lots. The proposed 4 lots here meets the subdivision standards of its RSD1 zoning, and with the other 3 lots to go below the RSD1I. To date, the applicant has not submitted any designs for the proposed houses on the lots. This is just for the subdivision purpose. And the reason for the subdivision is the owner of the property wishes to split the plot into 4 for his children. The application was forwarded to our internal departments. The main comments that came back to us were that the contribution funds of the 15,000 be invested in the water park enhancements. Concrete curb will not be required as there is no other curb on this portion of the road in Lower Town, but a French drain will be installed instead. And the other main comment was sidewalk is not required, but the number of driveways off the 4 lots must be put up for discussion. It was also circulated to our external governing bodies listed here. To this point, no comments, concerns or considerations were brought back. And the proposed subdivision has been pre-approved by the MOTI. The application was brought forward by myself to the APC on the 25th of November. And the following comments, of which were the main focus of the discussion. That they wanted to bring forward a restrictive covenant onto it to put the 4 titles enforce only 2 driveways off of the 4 lots. They wanted to know if planning include the roadway profile to be included in the road's master plan. And they were happy with the way that the subdivision was going ahead as it followed the form and character of Lower Town. On the 19th of December, the applicant followed protocol and organised a public information meeting on the 19th of December. The information meeting was only attended by 1 resident out of the 60-metre radius, as asked. No objections. The only one comment that the density bonus of the 15,000 required by the applicant to be applied to the upgrading of the public lake access between 2 addresses on the Lakeshore Drive South water side. No public objections were brought forward regarding the application in any other forms. The Lower Town strategy plan. So the intent of our Lower Town strategy plan is to provide strategic plan and directions for the future development and ongoing enhancement of the Lower Town. Lower Town promotes a mix of residential, recreational, and also community uses. The objective of our Lower Town plan, shown here, are three of the main objections of this. Approve only developments that are compatible with the form and character of our Lower Town, protect the integrity of our Lower Town's unique and compact neighbourhoods, and increase density to address our more affordable housing. The OCP strives to focus development on to create compact and complete communities within our district's urban growth. Proposal is close to amenities, schools and the Highway 97. Each lot will have ample on-site parking, so no parking will be required on Lakeshore Drive South. Proposal is in line with our lower strategic plan, creating density, historical narrow single-family lots, not unlike the ones already seen of 7.5. And it also protects integrity of our Lower Town's unique and compact residential. In summary, staff is recommending that Council pass the following resolution. Do you wish me to read it, Mayor?
No, it's okay. We can see it.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from Council? Councillor Peak?
Well, it isn't really answered here. When there are driveway opportunities, I don't quite understand how it's done internally to reduce the number of driveways. Could you better speak to me about that?
Certainly, to Councillor Peak through the Mayor. I will bring up the actual drawing here. So the applicant itself actually came forward with this design where there would only be 2 access points for the 4 lots, so sharing the driveways. We can put it in the resolution from Council that a covenant is put in place that this development and any future developments is restricted to 2 access points for the 4 lots. So if it is sold down the line, that they can't increase that, and then there'd be 4 additional access points. It would stay as the 2.
Okay, thank you for that understanding. But it wouldn't necessarily apply if we didn't put it in the motion?
That is correct.
As a covenant, which it isn't at this point, is it?
No, it's not.
Okay, thank you for that discussion, and thank you for the presentation, Shannon.
Councillor Patton.
Thank you, Worship. Probably a question for Brad. Would there have to be reciprocal access agreements between the properties in regards to when they want to do this?
Through your worship to Councillor Patton, I think the answer to that is it depends. It depends on the width of those access. Like there could be enough width from the shared accesses that they're sufficient from on either side of that boundary that you wouldn't need it. Now, if it's a proposed narrower access point, then we would probably recommend at that point that they have a reciprocal easement registered before subdivision approval.
Thank you.
Councillor Trainer.
Just a quick question. When the $5,000 for each property comes in, $15,000, where exactly does that go and who decides how it's spent?
Through your worship to Councillor Trainer, that actually is, I think, a council decision through the budget process. It goes right now to a reserve. Well, which I'm not too sure. You'd have to ask David what reserve that is. It's dedicated for parks and recreational assets only, or I believe fire equipment as well. So we'd have to be very specific as to what we were pulling in terms of projects from that reserve, but I'm sure David Setlichny can give you a report as to where that balance is to date.
Can I have one more quick question? Just for my own interest, French drains, are those common along in that area? I know that there's been no requirement for them down in Trout Creek, and I've heard really mixed things about them, whether they do anything. Can you just like briefly tell me if there's any others in that area and what they do?
Through your worship, to Deputy Mayor Trainer, I should say. Yeah, I'm not really a technical guy on stormwater management either, but basically it's basically a long drain that's across your driveway access to collect any water before it hits the roadway, and process it and infiltrate it within the ground before it hits the roadways. I think this is common practice now for us for any new driveway accesses that are being proposed, especially where there's no curb and gutter on the roadway, because we don't have other means of processing that additional stormwater onto our roads if we don't have curb and gutter and stormwater within an area. So that's kind of what our recommended practice is. I couldn't tell you how many properties have that in place in this area. Probably the newer homes would have it because it was recommended by us to put it in at that point in time, but some of the older homes, of course, wouldn't have had it installed.
So the water just goes into the ground then?
Or hits our road and sits there for a while, then infiltrates.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Councillor Peak?
Coming back to the driveway, is it recommended by staff to have it as a covenant, the driveway as a covenant, or is it better to leave it to staff to do that? And because you don't know, you don't know for sure when these properties will get developed. And if you really want to see the opportunity for less driveways, then it would be better as a covenant, would it not? Whoever.
Through your worship to Councillor Peak. I think my recommendation to council from this one was that and that's the reason why it's not included in the motion, is to leave the covenant proposal off. I think we can review this part of the subdivision application. The applicant has been very straightforward. Like this was submitted before we even brought it forward as a recommendation from us by the applicant as what his intentional plan is, as well, knowing what his intention is to construct potentially 4 homes for his children, is kind of the intent here, and not sell it as a development property. I think there'd be willingness to see this through. Again, if council wants greater security that there is only going to be 2 access points to Lakeshore Drive, then we could explore the covenant as well.
Okay, Councillor Barkwell.
Yeah, on the covenant issue, if you were to go with this plan, it doesn't seem, it's the same as 4 accesses as far as I'm concerned. And it still doesn't give me any concerns because along the rest of the street, there's accesses off the very narrow, lots of narrow lots. And you can even, the road's so wide there, you can even parallel park on it, which they are doing further down the street. So it's not a concern in my mind. I guess when I first saw it, I was a little disappointed that it wasn't more density. I thought it was an opportunity for a lot more units, but now I understand why the applicant's doing what he's doing.
Okay, so do you want to bring that motion forward, Councillor Barkwell? Okay. Could we just go to the slide with the motion written? Yeah, thanks. And a seconder, Councillor Peak. Any further discussion? I'll call the question. All in favor? And that carries. 7.7, year-end Development Services Report, Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Your Worship. I get excited always the first meeting in January because it's the year in review report, opportunity for myself and for the Development Services Department to present our activities. So I'm excited to be in front of you today to present our 2022 year-end report. In terms of development applications, you can see our year-end report here for the planning and development applications for 2022. And the moral of the story is that we're significantly down in terms of total planning applications. And I think this is actually a very good thing for us. If you look at where those applications have been dropping from the previous years. So primarily the bulk of the reduction is in development variance permits and development permits. And if council remembers, in 2020, we started working on our administrative amendments to our zoning bylaw to hope to create some better clarity, consistency, and deal with some interpretative issues with our zoning bylaw. We did a further update of that zoning bylaw review in February of 2021, and then also another review in 2022. So we've committed to continually reviewing the zoning bylaw and we can see the fruit of that review is resulting in less variances being submitted. And it doesn't mean that necessarily we're getting less permits, because in the next slide you can see that we're still getting a significant number of building permits being submitted at our office in 2022. Total construction value for year end was $49,622,000, which is the second most construction value that we've recorded for the district. So last year was a record year. You can see it in 2021 at 59 million. And we're now currently right at 49,600,000 in 2022. So for significant projects in 2022, we had the 45 residential unit lake house development that's currently being constructed in Trout Creek. It's probably our more substantial one at $18.3 million. But despite regardless of the larger projects, we still have a lot of building permits being submitted. In 2022, we had a peak year. None that we've experienced since 1993 in terms of the number of building permits that were submitted and processed. We did manage to maintain service levels with our building permit activity, even though we had a significant amount of transition in 2022 with our building inspectors. Had a lot of people kind of come through and some temporary coverage as well with our building inspectors. So it was definitely a difficult year for that team, but I'm very proud of their efforts to maintain our service levels and maintain with the increased amount of activity that we experienced. For further review for the year end, building permits were further broken up by building type. You can see for residential, commercial, and agricultural building permits. Our breakdown is provided here. And this is also a value in exploring the number of total housing units that were generated in 2022. Majority of those units are single-family dwellings. But I do want to state that there was some multifamily, primarily in the form of duplexes. We didn't have a lot of large-scale apartment buildings being constructed in 2022. The Oasis building currently, it was a 2021 building permit, so that wasn't included in these stats. But more low-density residential, multifamily townhousing, and also duplexes were kind of the additional increase in housing units added to our inventory. In terms of revenue, we had a total of $444,590 for our 22 actual, which is down from last year as expected, because last year was a record year. And nothing much else to say about that. In terms of bylaw enforcement activity, our total year-to-date, year-to-year comparison is provided here of 2022 versus the previous 2 years. You can see that from the breakdown of complaint files, the majority of them in 2022 were dealt with our Good Neighbor bylaw, which is a new bylaw adopted in 2021, as well as traffic bylaw was still high compared to other bylaws as well, and zoning increased in 2020 year as an area from years prior as well. In total, we had 838 bylaw enforcement files, so which is around our average, I would say, over the last number of years. Over the last, I would say, 4 to 5 years, around that 900 to 1,800 mark for total complaint files. For dog enforcement, and this is my last slide here, we also have further activity presented here. With a total of 331 calls for service from our dog enforcement contractor, which is a substantial increase from the year prior in 2021, when we had 173 calls. The majority of these calls were due to patrols in our park areas. You can see that blue bar in the middle of the graph there. So we had much more substantial enforcement presence in our park areas. Dale Meadows, Peach Orchard, Rotary, and Powell Beach, most likely in the peak season months when we've had a lot of activity with dogs in those areas. And I'm happy to take any questions on my presentation or the report that's in council's package. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Brad. Any questions? Councillor Barkwell.
I see that carriage homes are way down from previous years. They're not really providing that increase in density we hope for. Any explanation? One thing comes to my mind, it's just a wild guess, that maybe the easy ones, the easy locations have already been done, and so we'll expect fewer in the future.
Through your worship to Councillor Barkle, that's a good question. You know, it's the explanation for that. I'm not too sure what the answer may be. Could be costs related to, you know, we had significant costs in 2022 with the run up of construction costs and materials, electrical costs. You know, maybe that was a factor into why people would explore a carriage home. Like, these are usually people that have an existing property and they want to add to it. I do think that this is going to see a lot more growth in 2023 for this building permit type, specifically due to our short-term rental regulations in requiring a principal resident on site. We're already seeing some people inquiring about whether they can have a short-term rental, and we're saying, no, well, in your case, you can't because you don't have another suite. And they're saying, well, all right, I'm going to construct a suite, or here's my plan. I'm planning on purchasing this property, but I also want to build a suite because I want to have a short-term rental. So there will be some impacts, I think, in 2023 because of our new short-term rental regulation.
Good. Councillor Peak.
I always find these reports fascinating, so it's really exciting. Yeah, it gives you, the analysis gives you an opportunity to better understand where we're at, maybe how people are thinking, just like Richard was talking about why and why not. So I do find them exciting. I'm going to be very low-key on this particular comment. I don't know what all these things mean, PLA, TPC. Can you put a little graph on as a template on the report? ALC, I know, other ones I'm searching around in my head. It would just really, really help me. And I wonder, we had a little bit of a discussion about the need for reading electrical within a carriage house, or whether we did it through the primary home. And was that decided? Is that something we're reworking? Or are we having more discussion on it? I know it isn't exactly about the report, but maybe I could just bring it in.
Through your worship to Councillor Peak. Actually, I believe that's still something we want to bring forward to council for a discussion item through a separate report is whether we require a second meter for a carriage house or a secondary suite with our electrical utility. So it'd be an amendment to our electrical bylaw to do that.
Thank you very much. Appreciate the answer on that. If I may, Your Worship, the other was on the bylaw, and you made a comment about, well, these ones are likely to be in the season in the summer. Is there any breakdown on the bylaw analysis at present that you would be able to pull out whether these are, what seasons certain things occur?
Through your worship to Councillor Peak, I could do that. I don't have that at my fingertips right now, but we do provide monthly reports to council, as you're aware, so we could kind of do a seasonal review of the amount of activity that we're getting in certain months and explore kind of what our peak is and what it looks like versus kind of the winter months. I do know that just anecdotally, November, December, historically slower months for us and most municipalities for building permits because it's a quiet time of year, but it starts ramping up in January, which is what we're finding right now.
If I'm just interrupt, consolidating it on the actual reports, I know it comes in monthly, but I can't remember. So if it's consolidated, for me sitting at a council level, it gives me a better opportunity to understand the requirement for a bylaw officer. In a general way, I sometimes have a problem with having two bylaw officers because sometimes we make more work because we have more people. So I want to better understand what the requirement and the kinds of things that come through in a full year. And if it was consolidated in the report, then it wouldn't be anecdotal. So that's part of my questioning. And thank you for the opportunity.
Okay, thank you. So I've noticed we doubled our number of new commercial or industrial buildings from 1 to 2. So, but on that, I'm just wondering, it's kind of stuck at 1 every year. And, this is, I would think, the sort of thing we would want to encourage and might have some opportunity to get, more. Is this a discussion we could have at some point, either with the chamber or in strategic planning? I think we're missing out on an opportunity here.
To comment, I think for sure, yes. I think we're going to be having some discussions fairly soon with council on strategic priority setting. And we did have some discussions with council about extension of sanitary sewer to some of our industrial areas, which would perhaps help with encouraging more industrial commercial development. There are some things that I think we can do at the municipal level to encourage more industrial commercial development. That was just one in terms of sewer extension, but there could be others in partnership with the Chamber of Commerce and marketing, business attraction as well.
Thanks. Maybe make a note of that. Yeah. Councillor Peak.
I concur with your comments because I've had this discussion even previously at the chamber that there are properties in Summerland that could perhaps be better promoted or find out what the owners really want to do with the property. I advocate, as Councillor Van Alphen has, for the extension of the sewer in the industrial area we have otherwise. But there's one large property up on James Street Industrial that could be better utilized than the uses that the present owner has. I don't know who initiates those opportunities for discussion, but I'd like to see that happen. And for us, I'm sure it's partly through our strategic planning. So I'd like to see that happen as well.
Okay, thank you. If no further comments or questions, if somebody could bring this forward for information. Councillor Peak, second. Councillor Betts, all in favor? And that carries. Item 8, so this is, had anybody wanted to remove anything from the consent agenda, minutes or anything like that, this is where we would have talked about them, but nothing was removed. So we'll move on to item 9, Mayor's report. I don't have a report today, just Happy New Year to everybody. Hope everybody's rested after the holidays and ready to get back at it. Another busy week coming up. So we'll move on to the CAO's report.
Mr. Mayor, short report today. I'll start by saying I have a mask because I spent a few days with the flu. So get your flu shot, everyone, please. It's a bad flu year. I can testify to that. Welcome back from Christmas break. I hope everyone's had some much deserved rest. So during the break, staff were busy with snow removal duties given the frequent snowfall we experienced. The Department of Agriculture also notified us that a case of avian influenza was detected in a non-commercial poultry operation in the community. The primary control zone has been established, which effectively covers the entire district, so we put out information on Facebook as well. Now, this zone aims to limit the spread of avian influenza, and so residents planning to move birds or eggs need a permit from the Canadian Food and Inspection Agency, and more information can be found on the agency's website and on the district's Facebook and also on our website. As we turn the corner into the new year, we'll also take a step closer to the flood and fire season. It's early, however, the data we do have suggests higher than normal snowfall in our headwaters at this time. If this trend continues, particularly into the coming months, some flooding in the community is possible. A key tool we use to communicate with residents is an emergency tool called Voyant Alert. Residents are encouraged to download the app today. Beyond fires and floods, we also use the platform to communicate day-to-day communications such as road advisories, utility outages, garbage and recycling reminders, etc., down to the neighborhood level. The app can be downloaded in the App Store or Google Play, and residents can also choose how to be informed, whether that's by text, email, or voice calling to a landline. For more information, including how to register, go to our website and /cityservices/notifications. And that's all I have today.
Thank you. So last time we managed to drop the councillors' reports from the agenda, and looks like we forgot them again this time, but we'll just slide it in there. Does anybody have a report? Councillor Betts.
Thank you, through the mayor. I would just like to take this opportunity to share that the opening of the arena concession this past weekend was a big success for the businesses being called Rinkside by Granny's Cafe. And there was a large community turnout, and our citizens were really happy to have a provider back at the arena concession. So just sharing that was very positive from the provider. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? No, then public comment period. Do we have anybody? Oh, I have a K holder on the screen. Do you want to make a comment? No? Oh, no, I guess not. Okay, so I'd like to entertain a motion to go into camera, into closed meeting. Councillor Trainer, Councillor Patton, all in favor, and that carries. We'll just